Kevin Kuzia, fierceandmighty.com, relentlessly push yourself forward. Back with doing a second vlog for March 28th. I might end up posting it tomorrow, but part of the reason I decided to do this, I was thinking to myself, of the vlogs I've done so far, or any of the videos that have ended up on YouTube, later to be posted on Fierce and Mighty, I was thinking to myself, I've always dressed essentially like a complete and utter slob. Like, at best, I'm wearing some sort of hoodie, baseball hat. If you're lucky enough, maybe it was forwards. And I was thinking to myself, well, for the love of God, I at least got on a shirt and tie from work today. So why don't I take advantage of it so I can be a little bit more dapper, suave, debonair, and James Bond-like for you, my humble viewer. So the thing I was thinking about today is something I think about a lot at work, but I think it has equal application outside of the office and really almost anywhere in life. And I think about it as terms of let's get that centered there. 5. What is your top 5? And the reason I think about this concept of the top 5 is pretty simple. You will find pretty much at almost any point in your life, personal life, work life, social, family, friends, sports teams, whatever it may be, that there's a lot of things that are competing for your attention at any given moment. And a lot of those things all want to be A1, number one priority for you. And the problem is that you really can't have 15, 16, 20 different A1 priorities in your life because really what ends up happening is something gets dropped or you pretty much end up being completely flatlined on every single one of them. I don't really see that as being terribly productive. So something I think about a lot, especially when I have a lot of different things competing for my attention, as I do, as pretty much anybody I think does in their lives, if they're sort of busy and trying to keep themselves active between work and social and family and all sorts of other obligations, is constantly try to remind myself, what are my top 5 things that are most important? What's that top 5? And if I'm addressing things in that top 5 on a very consistent basis and a very conscientious basis, then chances are I'm going to feel pretty good about how things are going in whatever that area is that I have that top 5 ranking. And it doesn't mean that things that are numbers 6 to 10 or 11 to 15 or whatever it might be in the ranking, you don't necessarily have to have a written down ranking, although I do think it actually is somewhat helpful to sometimes write down what your topmost priorities are in any part of your life. It just means that when things start to conflict, if it's in the top 5, that wins out. If it's outside the top 5, those things tend to lose out. And, I find that more than anything else, right, you really need to stay very, very vigilant and very focused on it. When I start trying to satisfy 20 different priorities in any one given time, for one, the top 5, the most important things, the top 5 things that I've said are most important, end up falling by the wayside and not being done well. And the other things that not end up being done poorly anyway, because you're trying to peanut butter across every single thing that's so seemingly quote-unquote important to you. So I think it's just one of those things that people need to spend a little bit more time thinking about. I definitely need to spend at times a little bit more time thinking about, or at least reminding myself, look, does this fit with something that's really that important? Is this in my top 5? And if it's something on top of my top 5 and it's not conflicting, right? I have time for it. Some amount of free time has freed up for me. Yeah, and it's perfectly fine to spend time on that. Totally cool. You don't have to be such a tunnel vision kind of person that you ignore everything. But so I think about it at work. What are those top 5 things at work? I think about it when I'm, down in the gym and lifting. If I'm not working on those top 5 things, then I might be doing something that's really not all that important. And I think I'm only doing it because it just seemed to catch my attention that day, or it seemed to be kind of the shiny new thing that attracted my attention, like I'm some sort of raccoon working its way through the trash. Yeah? Is that the analogy I want to go through? Bright, shiny objects, raccoon in the trash. Yes, that's what we're going to go with. And, I think that's just the interesting sort of thing with it, is that you do need to spend time thinking about that. So I have those things at work. That's part of your performance reviews and everything else. That I try to focus on those more than other things. And I have those things, and when it comes to the gym and everything else. And then I think sometimes you have to have that unified list. That when it gets right down to it, right, when the work list and the personal list and the social list and the family and the friends list and the lifting list and whatever else it is kind of come together, you do have to spend some time thinking about, all right, when you do have that conflict, what's going to win out? And if you never ever prioritize things, it's always going to end up being a complete mess. I have learned this countless numbers of times from personal experience. I've screwed up on those sorts of things. If there's one thing I'm certain of, I will absolutely screw up on that at some point again in the future. But I think that is something that's important to stay vigilant on. So what I would advise for anybody is to think about a couple areas of your life that are important to you. Work certainly being one, family and friends being one, maybe some personal goals you have for yourself, and come up at least with sort of the things you deem to be important. And you might want the list a little bigger than 10, but just sort of get all the ideas down and then sort of start to rack and stack which ones are the most important. When you get up with your top 5, or maybe you want to be even more hyper-focused, right? Maybe you have a top 3, maybe you have a top 7. But I think 5 usually ends up being a pretty nice round number for it. Rank those things out, see where it falls out, and do something to try to remind yourself as to what are your top 5 most important things. I have a glass whiteboard that's up in my home office here, and I tend to use that to keep track of stuff during the week. If you have that visual reminder, it starts to build into the muscle memory. It starts to become something that's a lot more habit over time, and you will be a lot more prone to remembering and thinking to yourself, all right, I'm feeling a little frazzled right now. My time feels like it's absolutely being pulled in every which direction. What are my top 5 things? So think a little bit about your own top 5s. Write them down. I'd be curious to see them in your comments as to what are those sorts of things. Maybe we can compare and contrast. And hopefully you appreciate the time, the effort, the heart and soul that went into this video by virtue of this totally snappy shirt-tie combination here to just for you. I mean, yes, I know I could say I wore it for work today, but really, it was for you. FierceandMighty.com. This is Kevin Kuzia. Relentlessly push yourself forward.